everybody again to the second session today of our Lumsden McCormick Annual Exempt Organizations Conference. My name is Christine Prue and I will be serving as your host for today's webinar. Before we get to introductions, I am going to run through a few housekeeping items. This webinar is being recorded, and once it's available, we will share the link with all attendees. The chat and Q&A are both enabled. You can type in comments in the chat and questions for the panelists in the Q&A box. We'll be answering questions throughout and at the end of the presentation. We're offering 1 hour of CPE credit for this webinar. Therefore, you need to answer all polling and survey questions to get credit. We have 4 polling questions throughout the presentation. You'll be prompted for each and results will be shared. At the end of the webinar, please complete the short survey, which will automatically launch. The survey will serve as the webinar evaluation and is required for those requesting CPE credit. Your CPE certificates will be emailed from Prolera within 30 days of the conference. And I will put Maria's contact information in the chat for any questions you may have regarding CPE credits. Also, a link to the slide deck will be provided in the, in the follow-up email, and it is also available on our website under the events of this current event. Now, I am going to pass this off to Sarah so she can introduce Kim to you all.
Thanks, Christine. Welcome, everyone, and welcome back if you were at our last session. To this year's virtual exempt conference. Hopefully you were able to attend that first session where we discussed the HERO Act and additional requirements relative to quarantines, ADA requirements. Our next session is eliminating implicit bias and promoting emotional intelligence in the workplace, presented by Kim Wallace. Kim is a labor and employment law attorney who has represented employers, employees, and labor unions. Having worked on both sides of labor-related issues, Kim has a unique perspective on employer-employee relations. Kim currently works as a labor relations specialist for MICROAGGRESSIONS, where she handles collective bargaining and various contract enforcement issues for public and private sector unions. As we did in our last session, we will be adding Kim's bio and more information on MICROAGGRESSIONS to the Zoom chat if you'd like to read it. And for now, I will turn it over to Kim.
Thank you very much, Sarah. And thank you, Christine, and thank you, Maria, and thank you everybody at Lumsden for bringing me in to talk about this extraordinarily important and very messy topic. Lisa's presentation was very nuts and bolts. It was a great presentation. I wish mine was like that. It is not. Mine is messy and sticky and gray, and it's very important though. And we have to have these conversations, and I'm honored to be able to be here to speak about it. So we're going to talk generally about increasing emotional intelligence in the workplace. And specifically, we're going to talk about how we can use our emotional intelligence skills to tackle tough issues like implicit biases, unconscious prejudices in our workplace. DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion is one of the new buzz phrases that came out of the pandemic and a lot of the tensions that have been happening in our country recently. And I've heard conversations both professionally and personally where folks have mentioned that it's a little overdone and they've heard a lot about it, and how much longer are we going to keep talking about it? It seems to me that you just don't know until you know on this topic. I had an aha moment about 6 months ago, I'm sorry to say, where it finally got through my head, we cannot stop talking about this. Sitting here in a place of privilege and being part of a group that generally has not been oppressed, it's hard to know what it's like to be part of a group that has been the subject of systematic discrimination. And we don't know what we don't know. And until we all can sit here and honestly say, I have implicit bias, I recognize implicit bias in my society, in my workplace, in my family, and my friends, and I do what I can to eliminate it. Until we can all honestly say that, we have to keep talking about this. what's happening? Okay, there we go. Sorry about that. All right, so emotional intelligence, what is it? Have you ever met one of those people where you see them talking and they just make everybody seem so comfortable and at ease, and they're so personable, and they laugh and they get people to laugh and smile, and you're like, man, I wish I was more like that person. That person for me is Sarah Dayton, by the way. Those people have emotional intelligence. Those people have the ability to control their words and actions so as to garner a specific reaction from the folks they're interacting with. They have sort of the ability to control the room without being controlling. It's an art form. It's hard to learn. Practice makes perfect. And the more you think about it deeply, the easier it will be for you to get those skills, to hone and sharpen those skills. So basically, it's the ability to assess your own emotions. How are you feeling in a specific instance? To assess whether that's a feeling that will get the reaction you're looking for from whomever you're dealing with. You know, we say a lot, I say this to my 5-year-old, your feelings are valid. You can feel however you want to feel. But if you act on that feeling, there's going to be a reaction. And that reaction is maybe not something that you want. So an emotionally intelligent person can say, I am angry. But if I act on that anger, it's not going to, it's going to cause more anger, or it's going to cause frustration or whatnot in this other person. That's not where I need to go, especially in a workplace setting. So if you're emotionally intelligent, you can assess your emotions, you can influence them, and in doing so, you can influence, not manipulate, the emotions of other people. Emotional intelligence has been categorized into 5 main components. These are them, and in my opinion, some are more important than the others. So let me talk first about self-awareness, which I think is one of the most important ones. Self-awareness requires a bit of selflessness. My ex-husband has no self-awareness at all. He has no ability to understand how his actions will impact the actions of others, how people will perceive his act and his thoughts, okay? When you're self-aware, you can sort of step back and say, if I say this, or if I act in this way, other people will react negatively. Other people will be offended by my words or my actions. Therefore, I'm not going to act that way. It's hard to do this. It's easier to do this with people you love, right? You don't want to hurt them. And so you think, will what I say hurt my spouse, my daughter, whomever? And you don't want to do that. If you're sitting in a room with an employee who is complaining to you about something that you find insignificant, you have to be aware of the fact that your frustration and anger that's bubbling up inside you will not help the situation. What will help the situation is you being able to empathize with your employee. There's this negotiation guru I follow. His name is Chris Voss, and he is a genius. He has coined a phrase called tactical empathy. It's the ability to turn on empathy in a given situation. It's easy to empathize with our friends, our loved ones. We go to a funeral, our best friend's spouse died. We go there, we are empathizing. We can feel our friend's pain. Can we empathize with the employee who's sitting across the desk from us, complaining about something we find to be insignificant? That's the skill we need to hone to be more emotionally intelligent. Tactical empathy. How is that employee feeling and why? When we can say, when we can put ourselves in that employee's shoes and see the situation the way they see the situation, then we can self-regulate. We know how it is that employees feeling. We know how they want to feel. 9 times out of 10, well, 7 times out of 10, employees just want somebody to listen to them. They want to feel heard. I talk with employees all day, every day. I know that a good vent session, a good bitch session, excuse my language, but Lisa swore so I can too, can solve a lot of problems. Self-regulations. Self-regulation is the ability to control your actions and make sure you are talking, saying words, acting in a way that will get the reaction you want from your employee. How is your employee hearing the words you're saying? You want to make sure you're structuring your message in a way that will motivate your employee to act in the way you want. Say the right words so that your employee leaves your office feeling like you heard her and she is happy. It takes a lot of control, it takes a lot of patience, and it takes a lot of skill. So yeah, good luck. That's emotional intelligence in a nutshell. There's a couple places in the, in our day-to-day work lives where we can really, really use emotional intelligence. One of them is conversations that we have with our employees. Asking open questions, asking questions like, if there was two things that you wanted your managers or your supervisors to know, what would those things be? I read that in an article and it was a huge aha moment. I've never thought about that. What is it you wish I knew that you assume I don't know? I bet if we asked those questions more, we would learn a lot about our workplace that we didn't know. We make assumptions. Our employees make assumptions about their supervisors and their managers. They assume they know how it is to do their job. I hear employees all the time say, oh, he or she, my supervisor, they just sit behind their desk all day. Well, I guarantee that's not all they're doing. But your employees make assumptions because they don't know. And I bet that you also make assumptions too about what it's like to walk a day in your employee's shoes. What's it actually like to do their job? Do you know? Don't make assumptions. Have open conversations and ask those questions. If hostilities are very high or morale is very low, which is the case in many workplaces, especially today, consider bringing in an outside company to help you with these conversations. I'm part of an organization that recently, over the past few years, has gone through a lot of very disturbing morale issues. And as a leader in that organization, I racked my brain, what's happening? How can I fix it? How can I change it? We did bring in some outside agencies to do surveys for us so that we could get a better understanding of what the situation was, so that we had the data we needed to make changes. Employees feel sometimes their hostilities are so high, they've made such negative assumptions about their bosses and supervisors, they feel they can't be open and honest. So if there is an outside person there facilitating those conversations, it might help. Lastly, if you get that data, if you capture that information, and if you ask those questions, what is it you wish I knew that you think I don't? Make sure that you're acting on the information you receive. The problem will get even worse if you gather the information and then do nothing about it. So the surveys that we did in the organization I'm a part of, if we got the results from the surveys and nothing changed, our employees feel like, well, maybe they hadn't heard us, but they did now because I filled out the survey and still nothing has changed. That's an issue. Another place in another area in our workplace where we can use emotional intelligence is self-assessment. This is assessing ourselves as leaders and also assessing the organization as a whole, being self-reflective, looking in the mirror, and discovering where we fall short. In general, a couple areas where organizations are having issues these days. There's too much work and there's not enough staff to do the work. There's not much that can be done about that. That's just the way the workforce, the labor force is right now, for multiple reasons that is individual workplaces, organizations have no control over. The rewards that people are getting for the work they're doing are skimpy. these days more than ever. And I'm not just talking here from a union representative point of view. Inflation is high, wages have not kept up. Sales are short, profits are low. Again, the economy is not in the place where people are feeling that they're earning the money they deserve for the work that they're doing. And I'm not going to get on my soapbox and point fingers about that. The point of this is there are inherent situations right now in our workplaces we have no control over that are creating burnout and keeping morale low. So what do we do about it? Use emotional intelligence and do the best you can to hear your employees. Another area where that is causing discontent among our workers is inequity. I want right now to draw the distinct difference between inequality and inequity. They're different. Equality and equity are not the same things. Over the last 20, 30, however many years, we've done a lot in our country to make things equal. We have civil rights laws. We try and ensure that workers of all different races, genders, et cetera, are treated equal. They are subject to the same policies. They should be making the same wages based on the work that they do. Inequity is something different. Inequity is feeling inside that you're not being treated equally, even though you are subject to the same policies. Inequity is having a group of people who somehow are disciplined more, don't get the same recognitions, are not promoted as much than other groups of people, and recognizing that the way your policies, although equally applied, are constructed, there's inequity in the system. Polling question 1. I think Christine's, okay, good.
Yep. Okay, everybody. Polling question 1. When will the Bills win the Super Bowl? A, 2021, B, 2022, C, 2023, and D, never. I will give you just a minute here to answer. And then I'll share these results, which I see coming in, and they're very interesting. Okay, get those votes in. I'm going to close this poll and let's share those results.
Oh. Okay then. Next slide. All right. So that inequity conversation leads us to emotional intelligence and implicit bias. There's lots of definitions of implicit bias out there. I cobbled together a few to come up with something that I think makes sense. Implicit bias, first and foremost, is unconscious. We do not realize, for the most part, that we have implicit biases, and we do not realize, for the most part, that we act on them. It is a mental process in our head, unconscious, that stimulates negative assumptions about people from different groups. Those assumptions oftentimes are based on stereotypes that we have internalized, soaked into our consciousness over the course of our entire lives. There's a really amazing social commenter out there. His name is Jay Smooth. He did a TED Talk where he compared implicit bias to oral hygiene, right? He said implicit bias, unconscious prejudices, they're not like your tonsils. You can't remove it. You can't say like, oh, I did have implicit biases, but then I had them removed in 2005 and now everything's great. It doesn't work like that. Implicit bias is more like plaque that builds up on our teeth. The food we eat or the social stimuli that we digest throughout our lives, it builds up on our teeth whether we want it or not. And usually we don't want it. We don't know it's there. We don't want it, but it is there. Yes.
You just have someone would like you to repeat his name.
Oh, Jay Smooth, S-M-O-O-T-H, Jay Smooth.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So So this plaque builds up on our teeth. This implicit bias is in our subconscious. The best thing we can do is go to the dentist. Going to the dentist is like just becoming aware of the fact, I've got plaque on my teeth. I need to remove it. I have implicit biases. I need to be aware of them and do what I can to eliminate acting on them. This is especially important when we are leaders of organizations, okay? I told you guys, I had my aha moment months and months ago. I've been working on this topic as a leader in an organization, helping my union leaders work on this topic in their organizations. I've been living, breathing it. I'm aware that I have implicit biases. Something happened the other day that really made me upset with myself. I'm a Hallmark movie fanatic and I love them. And when the clock hits 12 a.m. on November 1, I am watching Hallmark holiday movies. One of the early ones I saw this season, all of the main characters were Black. And I consciously thought, this is amazing. I am so pleased to see that Hallmark is making these movies more accessible to people from different races. They're not all white people who look like me out there. There's African-American people who are main characters. That's great. So I'm watching the movie and it's not the same. And I'm like, what's wrong with this movie? And I have friends who are like me, and I wanted to really analyze this movie so I could talk to my friends about it. So I went through my checklist. Okay, the plot's the same. Big city girl comes home to her small town and meets her ex-boyfriend from high school who is a newly widowed father, and they fall back in love. It's great. All right, check. That's good. All right, it's nice and snowy. The town looks beautiful. There's all these small coffee shops. Okay, check. Scenery's good. Everybody's named Chris and Noel and Mary and Nick. Check. What's different about this movie? It dawned on me. The people on the screen don't look like me. And there's something in my brain that's just saying, there's something wrong. This isn't right. This isn't normal. And it made me feel uncomfortable. It made me feel I did not connect with the movie the way I was expecting to. And even now I'm getting goosebumps and I'm a little choked up, like, wow, that's something big and important, and I need to deal with it. And the impact of me not enjoying the Hallmark movie is like, who cares? I didn't enjoy the Hallmark movie. But what if I'm an HR manager? What if there's a resume on my desk from Mary Smith, who's an applicant coming in for an interview for a position, and I expect Mary Smith to look a certain way. And Mary Smith walks in my office and she is a 6'5" Black man with a 5 o'clock shadow, wearing a wig and tastefully and appropriately dressed in women's clothing. My conscious brain is like, okay, Mary Smith, not what I thought, but that's cool. Mary Smith is protected, is in a protected class. I am not going to discriminate against Mary Smith because of her perceived gender and sexuality. I don't want to. I'm a good person. My organization follows the law. I'm good. Am I good though? Is there something in my subconscious that is going to impact the way I judge Mary Smith as an applicant for this position? I don't know. But those are the questions we need to think about. We are leaders in organizations. We have legal obligations, we have moral obligations, and we need to make sure we're doing everything we can to live up to those obligations. So I'm going to show you some images now, and these images helped spark my aha moment, and maybe they will for you too. The first image, these are both pictures that were in mainstream media after Hurricane Katrina, same day, August 30th. Here are the descriptions. The first image, a young man walks through waist-deep water after looting a grocery store in New Orleans. If I had just seen this image without the bottom image, okay, yeah, like that's a story that makes sense in my brain. It's a story I've heard before. But compare it with the bottom image. 2 residents wade through the water after finding bread and soda at a grocery store. Why are they residents? Number one, residents, they belong there. And why did they find the food as opposed to the young man who looted to get the food? Why is that? Why does the female tennis star have to look all sexy? Well, the male tennis star can be in an action shot, his hair all mussed, presumably sweaty and whatnot. Why can't she be all messy haired and sweaty, grunting and playing tennis and being like a physically active sports star? As a mother, this is the one for me where I was speechless. I'm going to point it out to you because it took me a while to see it. Every single obviously Black child in this image is labeled as bad, as behaving badly. It's not cool. Even when you see the two kids up by the blonde-haired lifeguard with the umbrella up in the top left, even when there's a white child behaving the same way, the arrow is closer to the Black child. That's not okay. And when I saw the image, I thought to myself, well, this is probably from the 70s or 60s, whatever. We're better than this now. This is part of a national safety campaign, like marketing campaign that was put out by the American Red Cross in 1992. So I was, 1992 does not really seem all that long ago to me. This, I'm assuming, I'm making assumptions now, but I assume like there was a group of people who created this. It got vetted and edited it. Maybe there was even an outside ad agency that helped with this. It certainly was approved by upper management before it was distributed nationwide. And still, this is the result. All the Black kids are bad. This is what happens when we don't have diversity in our workplaces. This is what happens when there are not voices from all different types of folks at the table. Next polling question.
Okay, everyone, you're going to see that this polling question is two parts. The first is Kim's question she has on the screen. Have you ever noticed implicit bias in a work setting? And the second portion is just, are you attending this webinar to earn CPE credits? So if you could just answer both parts of that question, I'll leave it open for a minute so everybody has the chance to answer. Okay, everyone get those votes in, and I'm going to close polling in just a moment. Okay, we're closing that out, and here are our results. Okay.
Quite a few people have noticed implicit bias in a work setting. So, I'm glad we're talking about this. This is important stuff. We should be focusing on it. The point of that film for me, and the point that I want to make to you folks, is that there was nothing that explicitly discriminated against that man. There was no behavior that was aggressive. I mean, that man was able to eat at all the same places as the white folks, do all the same activities with his children as the white folks did with theirs. He became a judge, you know, so he was able to go to law school and do all those things, get elected or appointed to a judgeship. That does not mean that he was comfortable in his daily life and that he was treated equally by humans on a day-to-day basis. Okay, it is the implicit unconscious happenings in our brain, the implicit bias in our brain that as a society we need to be more aware of. Okay, so what do I do? Well, we have to do something. Okay, we've got to make sure that there are systems, that we are reviewing our systems and that we are ensuring that they create equity in our workplace. I'll give you an example from my life, from an organization, the organization I've been talking to you guys about. I'm on a board. I am the chair of the committee that is tasked with governing the board, and I have been for 5 or 6 years. It has been my goal since I've been in that position to make the board more diverse. This board is comprised solely of middle and upper class white professionals. I want diversity on the board. I want the board to be diverse. 4 years ago, we had a board consultant come in and tell us the way our policies are structured, there's no way it's ever going to happen. And we didn't believe her. We're like, no, our policies are fine. They've worked for us. We're a very successful board. Other boards have similar policies. It's just that we need to work harder at trying to recruit people from other groups. I'm embarrassed and ashamed to say that, 4 years later, we have absolutely zero diversity on our board still. Somehow I got it through my thick head, and it's through doing this work that our policies, although they treat people equally, they do not create equity for people, for applicants to our board. We are now in the process of analyzing and thinking deeply about how we can redo our policies so that there's equity. And it's a challenge that's hard. I'm going to give you guys some suggestions, some examples. I don't know your workplaces. You know your workplaces. I'm going to give you some general examples to start thinking about, okay? Here's one. Do you have a strict time and attendance policy? Okay, yes, of course we do. We need our workers to show up on time. Makes sense. So let's say you've got a group of 10 white employees and a group of 10 Black employees. Everybody's subject to the same policies. 9 out of the 10 white employees take or have their own vehicles. 5 out of the 10 Black employees have their own vehicles. The folks who don't have their own vehicles have to take public transportation. Public transportation is not reliable. People are going to be late. The impact of that policy is that 5 of your 10 Black employees are going to be late. 1 of your 10 white employees is going to be late. If you strictly enforce your time and attendance policies, the impact will be such that more of your Black employees are being disciplined than your white employees. It's not because they're Black. It's not because that they're in a minority or a group. It's just the way it is. You have to review your policy so as to create equity. I know it's mind-blowing. I don't have all the answers. I wish I did. It's going to take time and a lot of deep thought and introspection to do better, but that's what we have to do. Next question.
Okay, polling question 3. The holidays are stressful, fun, expensive, all of the above. Okay, give you everybody just one more second here, get those answers in. Okay, we're ending that poll and here are our results.
Completely agree. Yeah. Okay.
Hi there.
Hi.
Nice day, huh?
Yeah, finally, right?
Where are you from? Your English is perfect.
San Diego. We speak English there.
Oh, no. Where are you from?
Well, I was born in Orange County, but I never actually lived there
I mean, before that.
before I was born.
Yeah, like, well, where are your people from?
Well, my great grandma was from Seoul.
Korean. I knew it. I was like, she's either Japanese or Korean, but I was leaning more towards Korean.
Amazing.
I'm Shastina. There's a really good teriyaki barbecue place near my apartment. So I actually really like kimchi.
Cool. What about you? Where are you from?
San Francisco.
But where are you from?
No, I'm just American.
Really? You're Native American.
No, just regular American. Oh, well, I guess my grandparents are from England.
Oh, well. Hello, Governor. What's all this then? Dropping the morning to you. Let's get a small tea. Double, double, toil and trouble. On the gap, beware Jack the Ripper. Bloody hell. Pip, pip, cheerio. I think your people's fish and chips are amazing.
You're weird.
Really? I'm weird? Must be a Korean thing.
Microaggressions. Again, and shamed, embarrassed to admit that, a year ago, I didn't know what that meant. Microaggressions, like implicit bias, oftentimes are unconscious. When people think that they're doing the right thing, and it can be offensive. This is the epitome of you don't know what you don't know. We want to fix things. I don't discriminate, right? Microaggressions are, I have a lot of Black friends. I understand. No, I don't understand. It doesn't matter how many friends I have in other groups. I have not lived their life. Another microaggression, this is a micro invalidation, undermining the experience of a group of people. I don't see color. I'm not racist. Racism exists. Saying things like that undermines the experience of people who are in oppressed groups. This type of discussion, I'm telling you this, right? I'm not lecturing or anything like that. I'm telling you this because we need to start having conversations in our workplace around these topics. And when those conversations take place, don't fall into these traps. That's what I'm trying to say. There's a couple more I want to point out. It's not appropriate to rely on people from other groups to tell us how we should be talking about their experience or how we should be addressing implicit biases and discrimination. For example, if you were to go up to a Native American employee and say, we're really trying to do better. I want to know what's the appropriate way to address you. Do you prefer to be called an Indian, an American Indian, a Native American Indigenous? What's the right way to talk to you? That's not okay. That we have this thing called Google and we type it in, politically correct terms for addressing people of various races and ethnicities, we can figure it out. The labels that we use, historically have used, those labels are put on groups of people without their consent, right? Christopher Columbus coined the term Indian. I just learned this because he thought he had found India. So the group of people he found, they did not choose that term Indian. Whatever term it is that the group of people chooses, it's not their obligation to educate white people who are dealing with them, addressing them. If you want to implement a robust DEI program, do not take all of your minority employees, people from different sexualities, people with disabilities. Do not take them all and put them in a room together and to ask them to come up with a program for you. There are consultants out there, there are companies that can come in and help do this. They specialize in this type of thing. The majority should be self-educating first and foremost. And it's important for those in leadership roles to use their power and influence to take a stand, make a statement, and support employees from different groups.
To be white in so many ways is to be raised, to be functionally illiterate on the topic of race. I am white, and part of being white is that I was not raised to see myself in racial terms. I mean, I understood that somebody had race, but not really me. To be white is to see oneself outside of race, to see oneself as a unique, special individual, exempt from the forces of socialization. I'll never forget a moment of standing beside a Black man leading a workshop on race, and a white woman said to him, "I don't see color." He said, "Well, then how are you going to see racism?" "Because I am Black. I do think you know that, and I have a different experience than you do. And you're not going to be able to understand that, and you're not going to be able to support the parts of that experience that are really painful and problematic if you refuse to acknowledge my reality." I don't see color is really a way of saying I refuse to acknowledge your reality. What's important about that narrative is it reveals what the person thinks racism is. So if the person is using proximity, fondness across race as evidence of a lack of racism, in order for that to be good evidence, a racist must not be able to do that. So that rests on an understanding that a racist cannot tolerate proximity to people of color. And I'm hoping that we can see that's pretty absurd.
Oops.
Because trust me, even avowed racists can tolerate being around people of color, and often are. You cannot talk about any other issue without talking about how race informs that issue. And when someone says it's about class, that tends to function as a way to get race off the table. First of all, we're already divided by race. And focusing on race is not what did it. I would say not focusing on race, refusing to grapple with how race shapes virtually everything is what keeps us divided. And that is a very white narrative. All of those narratives function to get race off the table, close the exploration, exempt the person from any further engagement, and protect the racial hierarchy and the white position with it, which is an unequal hierarchy. The challenge I want to offer my fellow white people is changing the question from if to how. So dominant culture asks, if I'm racist. And I want to change that question to how have I been shaped by the forces of racism? How is racism manifesting in my life? Because it circulates 24/7, 365. None of us can be, and none of us were exempt from its forces. And this is where individualism can come in. I have a particular story, but that story didn't exempt me. And so I can ask myself, how did all the things I see as unique about me set me up into the overall racist structure? Because it did.
Why am I not going?
To be white in
Sorry. Okay, here we go. Sorry about that. So that woman's name is Robin DiAngelo. She wrote a book called White Fragility. It was one of those books that I immediately got my highlighter out. I could not believe I had lived 40 years of my life without thinking about these things, and I recommend it to everyone. There was a comment in the Q&A. When I lived for decades in Oklahoma, my Native American friends preferred being called Indian. When I moved here, it's the opposite. Not sure if I could find that out via Google. Me neither. The first time I heard, and it was a Black woman at a training I was in, say to the group, it's not my job to educate you about how you should be acting around me. I was like, whoa, okay, that was a little aggressive. But the more I thought about it, the more I kind of understood the premise. This systematic culture, right? Like racism exists, just like Robin DiAngelo said, we're not exempt from it. If we want to do better as humans and as leaders in our workplace, it's our job to do that. I guess that's the point I'm trying to make. Don't rely on people in minority groups to educate you on how you should be acting. So how do we talk about race in the workplace? These conversations are inherently hard and sticky because the system of race was never meant to make any sense in the system of race in our country as it's been built. Racism is the result, racism in America, I should say, is the result of centuries worth of justifying a way of life. And anytime we're dealing with race issues, we're dealing with a social construct that was not designed to make sense. It was designed as a way to justify and defend unconscionable acts. So yeah, today in 2021, talking about race, it's hard and it doesn't always make sense. We've got one more polling question.
Okay, and last polling question is, where should the new Bills Stadium be built? Very timely question. And Kim, I think when you see these results, you're not going to have a better answer of where it should be built. Okay, get those last votes in so you can get your CP credit. And I'm going to end the poll right now for everybody. And we'll share those results.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy. For me, I'm an Orchard Park girl all the way. I like to tailgate. Okay. So what do? Basically, we do better. We make space in our workplaces for diversity, and we make it a priority. We keep this conversation going. We don't say, oh, we're doing good enough. We keep it going. I think it'll take years to right this ship. We can't change the world. We can't change our country. We can't change our state. We can have an impact in our personal life. We can have an impact in our workforce. We need to start thinking about equitable and not equal. We're not all equal. We aren't all born of the same family situation. We don't all have the same backgrounds. So we need to take a look at our policies, make sure we're promoting equity to the extent that we can. Here's some ways to do it. Trainings for all managers, conversations with employees, review your policies. Buses run late. Can you provide more flexible hours? Can you provide work from home? Can you provide resources for more professional dress? If you have employees who you find aren't quite up to your dress code standards, can you provide them with resources where they might be able to go get appropriate dress? Additional trainings, provide technology for folks who need to work from home. Let's say you have, for example, school districts. Sometimes they have district-wide offices. If there aren't bus locations, metro bus locations in front of all of the individual schools, is there one at a central location? And then you can provide transportation to the other work locations that are part of your organization. From a more emotional intelligence perspective, affirm progress in your organization as you continue to work through this. Affirm progress. Don't set people up for failure. Make people comfortable. Assign like mentors if you can to folks from other groups who are starting in your workplace. Value multiple perspectives in your workplace. Let those other voices be heard. Build self-confidence through open conversations. Do the hard work. Have the tough conversations. I'll tell you that this was a tough conversation for me to have with myself, with my friends and family, with my colleagues, and with you too. It's hard to say these things, but we have to do it. We can't ignore it. We can't let the systemic inequality, inequity in our system keep going.
Kim, there's a question on pronoun usage in the Q&A.
Sure. Okay. What do you suggest regarding pronouns to use when addressing people? Ask how they would prefer to be addressed. Yeah, sure. So this is something that we're seeing pop up more often. So rather than targeting specific individuals, I would say to ask the question organization-wide. As part of a DEI initiative, say that the organization wants to ensure that it's making people feel comfortable with how they're addressed. If you would like to be addressed by a certain pronoun, if when you're being referred to in a specific way, you want the organization, the leaders, the people you work with to use a specific term, please let us know what it is. And then don't call that person out specifically. If you're going to initiate the use of pronouns based on how people would like to be referred to, do it for every single employee. Have it at the bottom of their email. Her, hers, she, whatever it is they prefer. That was a good question. Okay, that is it for me. Again, the Google reference. Are there any other questions? I'm by no means an expert. This is, I'm doing this because I've made it a priority for me and for the organizations I'm a part of to make this a topic of discussion. So I've learned quite a bit about it. There are people out there, there are organizations, consulting groups out there who can help you with this. And if you want help, I definitely recommend going the professional route.
Thanks very much, Kim. Thank you everyone for attending. I think this was very insightful. Hopefully you did as well. We now have an exciting technical accounting session that Seth Hennard and I will be presenting starting at 11. So I will turn it over to Christine to do the final things, and then we will switch to that session.
Thanks, Sarah. And thank you again, Kim, for this great presentation. And thank you everybody for attending. As a reminder, please complete the survey at the end of this program. In the chat, I have provided Kim's contact information if you'd like to reach out to her privately if you have any questions or anything of that nature. And like Sarah said, at 11 o'clock, we have her session coming up. So thank you again, everybody, for attending. And I will drop the link in the chat briefly so you can click right over to join Sarah's session when it opens up around 11 o'clock. Thank you, everybody, so much for joining us today.